His breath hovered inches from mine, a fragile thread of silence stretching between us in the dim light of the kitchen. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the pantry door. I could still smell the detergent on his hoodie and the sharp scent of peppermint from the tea he hadn't finished. His eyes searched mine, not hungry, not eager, but curious, confused, unsure if this was real. I should have moved, should have said something, but I didn't. We both leaned in at the same time. And then the front door slammed. Hard. Loud enough to make us both flinch. I stepped back like I'd touched fire. He blinked and turned away, his face blanking into the kind of practiced neutrality I'd come to recognize in him. Just like that, the moment vanished. And the rest unraveled far earlier than I'd like to admit. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal? It started with a resume printed on bright white paper, a too firm handshake, and the way my husband said, "This guy's got energy." He meant it as a compliment. I heard it as a warning. I was folding laundry in the den, rerunning a podcast I wasn't really listening to, when they walked in. My husband had that brisk tone he used during work calls. The young man beside him wore a navy crewneck and carried a backpack slung over one shoulder, like he hadn't realized he'd grown up. "He's here for the nanny position," my husband called, already walking toward his office. "You two chat. See what you think." The kid, no, the man, extended a hand. "Hi. I'm just here to help." He looked like someone you'd see behind the counter at a coffee shop, juggling 3 drinks and still remembering your name. Not the kind of person I pictured supervising bedtime and lunchboxes. Still, we talked. I asked questions, he answered. College senior. Child psych major. Plays guitar. Coaches youth soccer. Doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, allergic to cats. "I love kids," he said. "They're honest." He had that ease about him, like he'd already been in the house before and just waited for the rest of us to catch up. By Friday, he'd moved in. The guest room became his space, neat, organized, quiet. He cooked his own meals when we didn't share ours, left notes for our son on the fridge, "Don't forget your dinosaur book," and offered to drive carpool when my husband had late Zooms from his firm. At first, I thought it was guilt that made me notice him more, how he'd hum when he folded laundry or call my son champ without sounding condescending. I told myself I was just grateful. That was safer. My husband, meanwhile, was preparing for his business trip to Detroit. A full week. Maybe 10 days, depending on meetings. "You'll be fine," he said. "He's great with the kid, and you've got your yoga and book club." He kissed me goodbye at 5:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 6:15, the house was quiet again. I filled the silence with movement. Cleaned the pantry. Alphabetized the spice rack. Rearranged the fall decorations on the porch even though it was barely October. He knocked gently on the open doorway of the living room. "Hey. You okay?" "Of course." "Why?" He shrugged. "You've reorganized the same shelf 3 times. We laughed. Not a flirtatious laugh. Just a laugh. That night, we ordered pizza because my son begged, and I didn't have the energy to cook. He offered to go pick it up, came back with root beer and candy corn just because. After dinner, my son begged him to read one more book. He did, voices and all. I sat on the stairs and listened to them. The next day, I found him in the backyard building a makeshift obstacle course. My son was giggling like he hadn't in weeks. I stood there with a basket of folded towels, just watching. A strange ache lodged itself in my throat, sharp and unfamiliar. Thursday was colder. I offered to drive them to the community center. On the way back, my son fell asleep in the back seat. It was just us in the front. He rolled the window down slightly, let the wind whip his hair back. I forgot how quiet grown-ups can be when kids sleep. I didn't answer. That evening, I stayed up later than usual. When I passed the hallway, his door was open. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, strumming a beat-up acoustic guitar. I paused. He looked up. Took the headphones off. "Sorry," he said. "Too loud?" I shook my head. "No. It's nice." Friday morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes. My son had syrup on his cheek, he was laughing. He made smiley faces, Mom. I hadn't smiled like that in a while. The day spiraled quickly into birthday party prep. My son's classmate was turning 6, and the backyard was transformed with balloons, folding chairs, juice boxes, and overstimulated children. I flitted between conversations, frosting cupcakes, refilling the cooler. He was everywhere, tying shoelaces, calming tantrums, reminding one child not to eat grass. At sunset, the parents filtered out. The yard was a graveyard of plastic cups and cake crumbs. He helped gather everything, silently, efficiently. Later, we stood on the porch. My son was inside watching a movie. It was the first moment of stillness. "You look exhausted," he said. "I am." "You did great today." I nodded, too tired to thank him properly. He reached over, brushed a leaf from my shoulder, then paused. His hand didn't linger, but the gesture echoed louder than it should have. Saturday morning, I went to the farmer's market. He stayed back. When I returned, there was a drawing on the fridge, 3 stick figures under a big sun. One of them had a guitar. That night, we watched a Halloween movie marathon. My son fell asleep halfway through the second film. I carried him upstairs. When I came down, the room was dim, the credits still rolling. He looked at me, unsure whether to speak. I sat beside him. Close, but not touching. The silence between us was louder than anything else. Charged. Suspended. And then, "I can't believe someone like you is married." He said it so softly, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud at all. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat clenched. I stood up, picked up the empty popcorn bowl, and walked to the kitchen without a word. The moment didn't end. It shattered. And I felt something crack open inside me. Something I couldn't put back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. Every time it made a soft click, I thought of his voice in that living room. "I can't believe someone like you is married." Those words echoed in a loop until morning. When I came down to the kitchen, he was already there, making waffles, barefoot, humming some indie tune I couldn't place. He looked up briefly and nodded, nothing more. No trace of the night before, no acknowledgement. It was like it hadn't happened at all. I played along. The day kicked off in chaos. Our son's school had a Halloween fundraiser, and I had volunteered to help at the booth. Balloons, fake cobwebs, orange tablecloths with dancing pumpkins. He offered to come with us, said it would be easier with an extra pair of hands. I hesitated, but nodded. We rode in the same car, sat beside each other during the assembly, posed together in pictures taken by other moms, none of them realizing how stiff my shoulders were the entire time. We handed out candy bars and supervised pumpkin ring toss. I kept catching glimpses of him crouched beside my son, coaching him through the game. The kids adored him. So did the parents. A few of them even asked if he was my nephew. I smiled and shook my head. I didn't correct them either. The weather dropped by late afternoon, and we wrapped everything up just before it started to drizzle. The drive back was quiet, my son in the back, half asleep, clutching a plastic bat with googly eyes. I kept both hands tight on the steering wheel. He kept looking out the window. We got home and ordered Thai. I didn't feel like cooking, didn't feel like talking either. The food came soggy from the rain. We ate at the kitchen island while my son watched cartoons in the living room. The sound of animated voices and dramatic music drifted into the space between us. After dinner, I went to clean up. He joined me silently, wiping down counters, rinsing plates. Our hands brushed once over the dish soap. I froze. He didn't. Later, I found myself reorganizing the pantry again, lining up cans of soup, color-coding teas. Just something to keep moving. He passed through behind me, paused in the doorway. "You don't have to avoid me," he said. I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. The next morning, the air was bright and cold. The forecast warned of snow. Our son wanted to build a scarecrow for the porch, something he saw in a magazine. We went to Michael's, picked up felt, straw, and an old denim shirt. I let him drive this time. Inside the store, the three of us looked like a regular family. He carried the straw bale like it weighed nothing, and when my son asked him to hold the pumpkin stencil up to his face and pretend to be a scarecrow, he did it without hesitation. A woman in the next aisle smiled warmly. "You two make a great team." Neither of us corrected her either. Back home, the scarecrow project took over the front lawn. My son gave him a name, Charlie. He said we had to dress him up for Thanksgiving too. He promised to keep watch in case raccoons tried to steal the straw. The temperature kept dropping. We moved inside just as the first flurries started to fall. The fireplace roared to life. I made hot chocolate, 2 mugs with marshmallows, 1 without. He offered to take over bath time. I took the opportunity to hide in the laundry room. It smelled like lavender and dryer sheets. I folded clothes I had already folded once earlier in the week. Just something to keep moving. He knocked softly on the doorframe. "He's out," he said. Fell asleep halfway through his book. I nodded. He stayed there, leaning against the edge of the frame. "Are we okay?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "But I don't know what would make it okay." He looked down at the floor, then back at me. "And I don't know how it happened, or what moment allowed it to happen, or if it had already happened long before, but we kissed." It was quiet after that. Not awkward. Just quiet. We didn't talk about it. We didn't acknowledge it. We just moved on. The next morning was Sunday. My son woke me early, bouncing on the bed, excited to see snow. I pulled on boots and helped him zip his coat. We made oatmeal with cinnamon, and he ran to wake the nanny, asking him to help build a snow fort. The three of us went outside. The snow was still soft and untouched. My son dove in first, flailing around like a cartoon character. We all laughed. We spent the next hour building walls, packing snow, shaping something between a fort and a lopsided igloo. At some point, I noticed the neighbor's curtain twitch. I ignored it. My son lost interest quickly and went inside. It was just the two of us again. He handed me a handful of snow. "You've got gloves," I said. He shrugged. "I'm used to cold." We stood there, both pretending the tension hadn't returned. It had. Stronger this time. We said nothing. That afternoon, we baked sugar cookies, cut them into turkeys, ghosts, and leaves. My son decorated them with alarming amounts of sprinkles. The house smelled like nutmeg and butter. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, watching the snow fall. Your husband comes back soon, right? He asked. Next week. He nodded. You gonna tell him? I didn't answer. The silence wrapped around us again. On Monday, he suggested we drive out to the mall to get birthday gifts for his cousin back in Minneapolis. I offered to go with him. We could stop by Trader Joe's on the way back. The drive was quiet but easy. We didn't touch the radio. We didn't need to. We walked through Bellevue Square together, passing Christmas decorations that had already taken over. He pointed out a sweater that looked ridiculous, and I laughed louder than I should have. Then we saw a couple, woman, man, stroller. She wore a coat like mine. I felt my chest tighten. At Trader Joe's, we picked up gingerbread cookie mix and butternut squash soup. We stood in line, avoiding each other's gaze. On the way home, the sun started to set behind the trees. Orange and pink sliced through the bare branches. It was beautiful in that way November sometimes is, when it forgets to be miserable. And then, just as we turned onto our street, he said quietly, I think I need to quit. The words hit like black ice. I kept my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road. What? I shouldn't be here. My fingers tightened. We pulled into the driveway. I turned off the engine. Neither of us moved. He looked straight ahead. This isn't fair to you. Or him. Or me. And then he got out. That night, I lay awake again. Only this time, I wasn't thinking about what happened. I was thinking about what might be ending before it even had a chance to begin. I didn't ask him again about quitting. I didn't mention it. Didn't bring it up. But the silence between us thickened, and it followed us from room to room like humidity before a storm. He went about his usual tasks, packed lunches, loaded the dishwasher, picked up stray socks from under the couch, but there was a new distance to it all. Not coldness. Just restraint. Like he was editing himself in real time. On Tuesday morning, I overheard him helping my son get ready for school, making jokes about cereal mascots and mispronouncing dinosaur names on purpose just to make him giggle. I stood behind the door, not moving. I couldn't join in. I couldn't make it normal. That afternoon, it started raining. Real Pacific Northwest rain, relentless and unapologetic. I offered to drive them to the library for the puppet show instead of letting them walk. It wasn't about the weather. It was about needing proximity. Even if we said nothing. We sat side by side during the show, pretending to be absorbed in the chaotic retelling of the Three Little Pigs. But I felt it again, his stillness, his retreat. Not angry, not bitter, just leaving slowly without a suitcase. At home, my son took his nap. I started laundry. When I turned from the dryer, he was standing there. Not close, not threatening. Just present. I meant what I said, he said quietly. About quitting. I nodded, though I didn't want to. I understood. It's not because I want to, he added, almost like a confession. I looked at him, really looked this time. And without planning it, without words or decisions, we kissed. The moment passed quickly. No music, no crescendo. Just breath and gravity. And then it was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. Wednesday morning, I packed snacks for a park day. It was unusually sunny for mid-November, and our son had energy to burn. I texted 2 other moms and invited them to join us with their kids. I needed distractions. Noise. Other eyes. He drove. I sat in the back seat with my son, pretending to care about superhero trivia. At the park, I watched him push the swing, tie shoelaces, carry jackets. One of the moms leaned toward me. He's really something, she said. Wish I had a live-in like that. I smiled tightly. Didn't answer. Back at home, my son crashed early. We both knew it was from the sun and the running, but it still felt like the universe giving us space we didn't know how to use. He made tea. I watched him pour water into the mugs. You're leaving, then? I asked. Probably. When? Soon. He looked exhausted. So did I. Thursday brought a distraction in the form of a school conference. My son's teacher wanted to meet both of us. His nanny's around so much, I figured we'd include him. She smiled like it was a compliment. We both showed up. The meeting was fine, positive, upbeat. But I couldn't shake the way she said nanny like it was a title, a role, not a person with thoughts, doubts, feelings. On the way back to the car, we didn't speak. I unlocked the doors and slid in. Finally, he asked, "You ever think about running away?" From what? From everything. All of it. I didn't answer. Friday was supposed to be normal. We made plans to go to the pumpkin patch up north. They had a petting zoo and hot cider. The drive took 40 minutes, and my son spent most of it singing loudly in the back seat. I welcomed the noise. The fields were muddy from the week's rain, but we made it through the corn maze, fed goats, took pictures with a wooden tractor. It was one of those family days that look better in memory than they feel in the moment. We stopped for burgers on the way back. At the drive-thru, he reached for the bag and accidentally brushed my hand. I pulled away like it burned. That night, while my son was in the bath, I sat in the laundry room again. The one place where the walls didn't feel like they were listening. He walked in without knocking. "I'm sorry," he said. "About all of this." "I'm not," I replied. We didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Saturday morning was the beginning of the end, though I didn't realize it yet. I had just finished folding towels when I heard my son shout from the kitchen. I walked in to find a mess, apple juice everywhere, a plate shattered on the floor. "He tried to help," my son said, pointing to him. "But the juice exploded." I laughed. I couldn't help it. So did he. It was the first real laugh we'd shared in days. We cleaned up together. We made toast instead. We danced to a terrible pop song playing from the Bluetooth speaker on the counter. It was ridiculous and brief and necessary. That night, the three of us watched an old animated holiday special. My son fell asleep halfway through. I carried him upstairs and tucked him in. When I came down, the living room was dark except for the flicker of the screen. He was still there. We sat in silence for a long time. And then he said, "Maybe I'll stay a little longer." I didn't ask why. I didn't challenge it. We just sat. Sunday morning, I woke early. The house was quiet. I walked down to the kitchen in my robe, ready to make coffee. But the kitchen was already clean. Everything put away. No sign of breakfast. No noise. I opened the guest room door. It was empty. Bed made. Floor swept. Drawers bare. And on the pillow, folded once with perfect precision, was a small piece of paper torn from my son's notepad. One sentence. "I have to go before we both forget who we were." I stood there in the doorway for what felt like hours, holding that torn note between my fingers, the paper soft and already beginning to curl at the edges. I read the words again. Not because I didn't understand them the first time, but because my brain needed time to catch up with the reality my body had already begun to feel. He was gone. No suitcase in the hallway. No shoes by the door. No toothbrush on the sink. Just absence. A vacuum where his rhythm used to hum through the house, his early morning steps, his gentle guitar playing, his laughter echoing down the hall. All gone. I left the note on the dresser and went to make breakfast like it was any other Sunday. My son noticed immediately. "Where is he?" "He had to leave early," I said, cutting bananas for the pancakes. "Something important came up." "Will he come back?" "I don't know." He didn't ask again. He just pushed syrup around his plate with the side of his fork until it soaked through into the table. By noon, the house felt too still. The silence was the kind that vibrates, too loud to be ignored. I busied myself packing a weekend bag and told my son we were going for a little adventure. "Somewhere with trees," I said. "Somewhere quiet." We drove out toward the foothills east of Seattle, the air turning colder with every mile. The small cabin I booked last minute through a travel app was tucked away off a winding road, surrounded by evergreens and wet moss-covered boulders. It smelled of pine and wood smoke, and that somehow made me feel like I had the right to breathe again. We spent the afternoon exploring nearby trails, throwing rocks into puddles, and watching squirrels dart between fallen branches. My son picked up a stick and declared it magical. I smiled, nodded, and let him believe it. He ran ahead, cape flapping behind him, and for a moment, I let myself believe in magic too. Back at the cabin, I made grilled cheese on a portable stove and heated up canned tomato soup. We ate by the fire. The glow softened everything, the corners of my face, the edges of my thoughts. I read 3 bedtime stories that night. When he finally closed his eyes, I didn't move. I just sat beside him, staring into the wooden wall, as if some answer was carved between the grain. A log cracked in the fireplace. I stood up, walked outside. The trees loomed overhead, tall and unmoved. I pulled the sweater tighter around my shoulders and sat on the porch swing. Then headlights cut through the dark. At first, I didn't believe it. My chest tightened with a panic so sharp it made me nauseous. But the car slowed, crunched over gravel, and stopped. He stepped out. No words. No dramatic gestures. Just him. Standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, as if he'd been here before. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I know." "Then why?" I couldn't leave it like that. The fire inside was dying, and the cold outside was creeping in. I opened the door, not because I had decided anything, but because I didn't know what else to do. We sat by the fire without talking. I handed him a mug of cocoa I'd made earlier. He took it with a quiet nod. An hour passed like that, 2 people in the same room, breathing, existing, saying nothing. But everything was loud anyway. After I checked on my son and made sure he was still sleeping, I returned to find him sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the flames. "I didn't plan this," he said. "I know. I keep thinking about what this would look like from the outside. And I can't make it make sense. But it feels like the only thing that makes sense at all." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was no decision made that night. No declaration. No plan. We spent night together. The next morning, he was still there. The cabin looked different in daylight, less magical, more real. The dishes from last night were still in the sink. The empty cocoa mugs. The folded blankets. I packed slowly. My son helped zip up bags and carry them to the car. We didn't talk much on the ride home. My son dozed off in the back seat. We both kept our eyes on the road. The trees gave way to strip malls and gas stations, the quiet to the normal chaos of the city. Back home, the leaves had piled up on the lawn. A reminder that life hadn't paused while we were away. We got out of the car. I unlocked the door. He grabbed his duffel bag from the trunk. I thought he'd follow me in. But he didn't. I should go, he said. I looked at him, confused. Where? I don't know. Just not inside. I stood there, keys still in my hand. You already left once. I know. And came back. He paused. Maybe I just needed to know what it felt like to come back. Then he turned and started walking. Not toward his car. Just down the sidewalk, into the crisp afternoon, as if he had all the time in the world and nowhere he needed to be. I stood on the porch, frozen. Then I heard another engine. A car pulled into the driveway. My husband. Home 2 days early. He stepped out of the car with that familiar click of the door he always closed too hard. The same black duffel he took on every trip hung from his shoulder. No flowers, no souvenirs, just a half-finished bottle of Fiji water in his hand. I froze on the porch, still holding the keys. The one person I hadn't prepared for walked straight toward me like nothing in the world had changed. You're early, I said, voice even. Flight got cancelled, he replied. I caught an earlier one through Salt Lake. Thought I'd surprise you. He leaned forward to kiss me. I tilted just enough for it to land on my cheek. If he noticed, he didn't say a word. He walked past me, through the front door, dropped his bag in the hall, and disappeared into the kitchen. My son, hearing the commotion, bounded out of his room and yelled, "Daddy," without hesitation. The two of them embraced in that loud, familiar way that made the house feel too small. I stayed outside, unmoving, watching the sidewalk. But there was no one there. He was already gone. Inside, the rhythms picked up instantly. My husband asked about school, about the weather, about Halloween decorations still strung up on the mantel. He opened the fridge, commented that it was better stocked than usual. He moved through the house like someone checking back into a hotel room, too comfortable in places that were supposed to belong to someone else by now. I told him we'd been out of town. A short trip. Fresh air. Change of scenery. He nodded without much interest, took a long sip of the water, and glanced at the mail pile. That night, we had dinner at the kitchen island. I made pasta, oversalted the sauce, burned the garlic. Nobody commented. My husband told a long story about an executive who spilled espresso on his presentation deck. My son laughed even though he didn't understand the punchline. I nodded when I needed to, smiled when expected. After our son went to bed, I cleared dishes while my husband scrolled through emails on his tablet, muttering about client budgets. I dried my hands, turned off the light, and walked upstairs without saying goodnight. The next morning, he was already gone before I woke up. A note on the counter, his handwriting rushed, all uppercase, read, "Early meeting. Back late. Love you." 3 lies in 8 words. I took my son to school and drove straight to the grocery store. I wandered aisles without a list, picked up things we didn't need. Grapes. Cinnamon sticks. A pie crust I'd never use. I kept checking my phone even though there were no messages to wait for. By midday, I found myself cleaning again. The deep kind. Pulling out couch cushions, scrubbing baseboards, emptying drawers. Every task was a distraction from a thought I wasn't ready to let land. Around 4, I heard the front door. "Smells like bleach," my husband called out. That a good thing or a bad thing? He set his laptop bag down and headed straight to the fridge. He asked what was for dinner. I told him we hadn't decided yet. He shrugged and pulled out leftovers, reheated them in the microwave, and ate standing by the counter. The normalcy made me nauseous. Later, while putting away folded clothes, I found one of his sweatshirts buried under a pile. Not my husband's. His. The one he always wore when making pancakes. I held it for a second too long, then stuffed it deep in the back of my closet behind old gift bags and unused scarves. The rest of the week was a blur of mundane moments made unbearable by the pretense. My husband resumed his routines, late calls, conference calls, earbuds in during dinner. My son adjusted easily. Too easily. Like flipping a switch from one reality to another. By Friday, the air turned colder. The forecast warned of frost. We stayed in that evening, ordered Chinese. My husband fell asleep on the couch halfway through a movie none of us were watching. I lay awake upstairs, staring at the ceiling fan again, listening to the familiar tick of its slow rotation. Saturday brought invitations. Our neighbors were hosting a backyard chili potluck. Casual, kid-friendly, bring your own drinks. My husband insisted we go. Said it would be good to see people. I said yes because I didn't have the energy to say no. By 5, the backyard was lit with string lights and folding tables. Crock-pots lined the buffet table like contestants. Laughter floated around like smoke from the fire pit. I stood with a paper bowl in hand, trying to smile when people asked how we'd been. One of the moms leaned in, her voice low. "Where's your helper? The kid loves him." I swallowed. He had to leave. School stuff. She nodded, disappointed. He was great. I nodded too, holding it all together with the tight grip of my plastic spoon. My husband made the rounds. Told jokes. Talked shop with the neighbor in finance. Pretended he knew something about chili spices. I watched from a distance, sipping a lukewarm cider, wondering how someone could look so present and be so absent. We left early. My son was tired. I used that as an excuse. Back home, I tucked him in and went downstairs. My husband was already watching sports highlights, beer in hand. He looked up. "Want to watch something?" I shook my head. "I'm tired." He nodded and turned back to the screen. I walked upstairs. 10 minutes later, I opened the closet and pulled out the sweatshirt. Still smelled faintly of detergent and something softer. I sat on the floor and just held it. The next morning, I woke up to silence. I walked downstairs to find my husband already dressed, suitcase at the door. "What's going on?" I asked. He didn't look at me when he answered. "I found the sweatshirt." My chest went hollow. "I'm not mad," he added. "I just don't want to have this conversation." He reached for his coat. "Where are you going?" "To my brother's." "For a few days." "Maybe longer." I wanted to ask how he knew. When he found it. What else he knew. But the words didn't come. As he stepped out the door, he paused. There's a lot I could say. But I'm tired too. Then he was gone. The silence after the door closed was heavier than any words he could have left behind. I stood in the hallway, still in pajamas, barefoot, holding a coffee mug I hadn't even sipped from yet. I watched through the window as his car backed out of the driveway. No hesitation, no second glance. Just brake lights disappearing down the street and the slow realization that something had truly shifted. I didn't cry. Not then. I moved through the rest of the morning like a machine, dressing my son, pouring cereal, pretending I hadn't just watched a 20-year routine drive itself into pause. He didn't ask where his father had gone. He accepted the absence like he'd accepted the presence, casually, without expectation. By noon, the house was too clean. Too still. The ticking wall clock was the loudest thing in the room. I picked up a sponge, then put it back down. Pacing didn't help. Lists didn't help. The weight in my chest wasn't moving. So I grabbed my keys. We drove out of the neighborhood, no plan, no destination. I stopped at a pumpkin patch we'd already visited weeks ago, let my son run through the rows even though the best ones were already gone. He picked a small, lopsided one and named it after a cartoon character I didn't recognize. I let him. At the checkout stand, the woman commented on how calm I seemed. I smiled at her, but it wasn't a real smile. Just enough to keep the moment from turning into a question. We took back roads home, passed through a sleepy town I hadn't been to in years. There was a diner still standing, rusted signs and all, and I pulled in on instinct. We sat in a booth near the window. My son pressed his face against the glass while I ordered grilled cheese and fries for both of us. He colored on the napkins while I stared at the red vinyl across from me, remembering nothing and everything all at once. After lunch, I drove slower. I didn't want to go back to the house. The structure was still there, but the rhythm was gone. My husband had only been gone for a few hours, and yet the walls already felt altered. At home, I let my son nap while I folded laundry that didn't need folding. When I opened the linen closet to put away towels, something small fell from the shelf, a toy car. The kind my son had outgrown. But not just any toy. It was the one he'd handed to the nanny before he left. A gift. I stared at it. Turned it over in my hand. The little wheels still worked. The bottom had a red sticker on it, his name scribbled in my son's handwriting. I sat down right there on the hallway floor, legs curled against my chest, the toy car resting in my palm. It had been days. No word from him. Not even a sign that he existed. And yet here was this tiny object he hadn't taken with him. A piece of connection he'd left behind. That night, I didn't cook. I made microwave popcorn and apple slices. My son didn't complain. We watched a holiday cartoon on streaming, and I let him stay up later than usual. When he finally drifted off, I sat in the hallway outside his door, just listening to the sound of him breathing. It wasn't grief. It wasn't regret. It was something more complicated than either, like a soft ache that couldn't be named. The next morning, I opened the front door and found a box on the porch. No note. Just a package addressed to my husband, delivered from his office. I carried it inside and set it near the stairs. My fingers hovered over the seal. I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured coffee, and stared out the window. Then I saw him. Across the street. Not the nanny. My husband. Sitting in his car. Alone. He didn't knock. Didn't call. Just parked there, engine running. Like he was waiting for a signal. Or for me to brake first. I closed the curtain and sat down at the kitchen table. 5 minutes passed. 10. I checked again. Still there. I opened the door slowly and stepped outside, coatless in the cold. I walked across the street. He rolled down the window. I wasn't going to come in, he said. I didn't want to be somewhere else either. I nodded. Okay. Did he come back? No. He looked down at the steering wheel, then back up at me. Are we okay? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. He turned the engine off, finally. I can sleep in the guest room. I nodded again. If you want. That night, we didn't speak. He kept his distance. I made tea. He read emails. We coexisted. By Tuesday, it almost felt like we were pretending to play house again. Shared glances, polite conversation. But everything was rehearsed. The pauses, the questions, the silences between them. Wednesday morning, he offered to take our son to school. I agreed. An hour later, I received a message from the front desk at school. He had never shown up. I called his phone. No answer. I drove to the school myself. My son was sitting in the office, swinging his feet under the chair, unbothered. I thought Dad was taking me, he said. He got busy, I lied. Come on. On the way home, I tried calling again. Still nothing. That evening, I found his suitcase back by the door. But he wasn't in the house. On the kitchen table was a note. 4 words. I changed my mind. He had left again. Without discussion. Without conflict. Just absence. But this time, something felt different. Because taped beside the note was the small red toy car. The one I thought was hidden. It hadn't been forgotten after all. It had been found. A message. A quiet one. But loud enough. I stared at the toy car taped beside his final message for longer than I should have. It wasn't the words that hit hardest, it was the gesture. The understanding of what it meant to leave something behind, and what it meant to take it back. He had come back. Found the sweatshirt. Found the toy. Left both behind this time. Deliberate. Clean. I took the car down, slowly peeled the tape away. The little red sticker was still intact, though it had started to curl at the corners. I placed it on the shelf above the kitchen sink and turned away. I didn't want to look at it anymore. But I couldn't throw it out either. The house didn't feel like mine. Not anymore. Not with the guest room empty again, and not with my husband gone a second time, this time quieter, without confrontation. Just a closed loop. He hadn't fought. He hadn't begged. He had simply left the moment he knew there was no room left for pretending. The days that followed were silent, measured by the sound of cabinets opening and closing, the creak of floorboards I used to step over out of habit. My son adjusted again, too easily for his age. He stopped asking questions altogether. He began building things out of Legos that made no logical sense but took up the entire hallway. Towers that leaned, sprawling rooms with walls made of mismatched colors. The following weekend, I packed a bag again. We drove out to the base of Mount Rainier. A different cabin this time, smaller, older, with a screened-in porch and a wood stove that barely worked. I didn't go for peace. I went because I couldn't sit in the same rooms anymore. I needed the walls to change. There was no snow yet, just mud and leaves and gray clouds that hung too low. My son threw pebbles into the creek behind the cabin while I stood on the edge of the deck, arms wrapped around myself. I kept expecting to feel something, regret, guilt, sadness. But all I felt was a strange sort of clarity. Like when a storm has already passed, and all that's left is to clean up what's broken. We made sandwiches and played board games by lantern light. I pretended to care who won. I laughed when he made jokes that didn't land. I tucked him in early. He didn't protest. I sat by the window for hours that night. Not waiting. Just watching. At some point after midnight, I turned off the lantern and lay down on the couch. The room was cold. I didn't bother to pull a blanket over myself. I wanted to feel it. I woke up to birds outside the window and the sound of a kettle screeching on the stove. I hadn't started the fire. I hadn't put water on. But the cabin smelled like heat, like wood smoke and something warm. He was there. In the kitchen. The kettle whistled harder as he turned it off and poured the water into 2 mugs. He looked up. He didn't speak. I sat up slowly. I didn't know where else to go, he said finally. I nodded. We ate breakfast together at the tiny wooden table without saying more than necessary. My son joined us late, yawning, excited by the surprise. He didn't ask how or why. He just accepted it. The three of us went hiking later that day. Not far, just to the edge of the tree line where the air got thinner and the view opened up. My son ran ahead, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. I walked behind, quiet, watching the space between us. He caught up to me once. Walked next to me without closing the gap. After a long moment, he said, "I haven't been okay since I left." I didn't reply. That night, we played cards. My son fell asleep early again. We sat across from each other, a deck of cards spread out between us, untouched. "I thought I could disappear and make things cleaner," he said. I shook my head. "You didn't disappear. You just paused." He looked down at his hands. "Do you want me to stay?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. He left before sunrise. No note this time. Just one of his socks left on the floor. Folded neatly, intentionally. As if to say, this isn't over. 2 days later, I was back home. Back to routines I no longer believed in. That Wednesday, after drop-off, I passed a coffee shop I hadn't been inside in years. The kind of place with chalkboard menus and the smell of burnt espresso. I parked and walked in without a plan. He was there. Not the nanny. My husband. Sitting by the window with a woman from his office. I recognized her from a holiday party 2 years ago. She was leaning toward him, smiling in that way people do when they think no one's watching. He didn't touch her. But he didn't see me either. I turned around and walked back to my car. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the kitchen floor and opened my laptop. There was an email waiting. From a sender I hadn't seen in weeks. "I'm at the cabin again," it read. "Come if you want to. But only if you mean it." Attached was a picture. My son's toy car. Parked on the windowsill. Facing outward. I stared at the photo for a long time. The car, my son's car, was on the windowsill, facing outward, just like he used to position his toys when playing watch guard during rainy afternoons. Only now, it felt like something else entirely. Like a question waiting for an answer. Or a signal. Or a goodbye. I couldn't decide which. I didn't respond to the email. Not right away. Instead, I shut the laptop and walked to the laundry room. I pulled the old basket from the shelf, the one I hadn't touched since before everything fractured, and dumped it on the floor without sorting. I washed clothes for the sake of moving. Because if I stopped moving, I knew what would come in to fill the space. The next morning, the sun came out, sharp and bright, cutting across the hardwood like a spotlight. I stood in the kitchen, holding the car key to a vehicle that hadn't been parked in front of our house in weeks. I put it down. Picked it up again. Then left it by the sink. That afternoon, I picked up my son early from school. He asked if we were going somewhere. I told him not yet. Later, after he fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons, I paced the hallway. Then I opened the closet and found the duffel bag I hadn't touched since our last cabin trip. I packed only what I needed: sweaters, his favorite bedtime book, socks without holes. The essentials. I moved quickly, like if I slowed down, I'd change my mind. But I didn't go. Not yet. That night, the house was too still. The walls too aware. I lit a candle in the living room just for the flicker. I sat on the edge of the couch, arms folded tightly, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the wind outside tapping at the glass like someone unsure they were welcome. By morning, the sky had clouded again. A soft, low gray. The kind that swallows the horizon. I made a thermos of tea, packed snacks, and drove. The roads were half empty, the kind of quiet that usually feels peaceful but today felt anticipatory. Like the world had leaned slightly in, waiting. As I turned onto the gravel path leading to the cabin, I slowed to a crawl. The trees stood still. The porch light was off. Curtains drawn. His car was there. But I didn't see him. I parked. My son was still asleep in the back seat, his head tilted, lips slightly parted. I left the engine running and stepped out. The air was colder than expected. I walked to the door slowly, heart rattling against my ribs in a way I couldn't quite control. I knocked once. Nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the cabin smelled like cinnamon and wood. Familiar. He wasn't in the main room. The kitchen was clean, the stove cold. I walked in further, toward the bedroom. He was there. Sleeping. Not curled. Not restless. Just still. I stood at the doorway for a long time before stepping back. I didn't wake him. Instead, I returned to the car, adjusted my son's blanket, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. 10 minutes passed. Then the door creaked open. He stepped out barefoot, blinking against the light, wearing the same sweatshirt I thought I'd hidden for good. He looked at me, then at the car, then back at me. I rolled down the window. I didn't answer your email, I said. I know. But I'm here. He nodded once. You're not sure? No. Me either. He looked down at the gravel for a long moment. Then he said, but I didn't move the car. Your son's. I saw. I left it there. It hasn't moved. I didn't reply. He stepped closer. You brought him? He's asleep. He nodded again. We stood there in the quiet. Then, from inside the cabin, a sound, a kettle whistle, faint but real. He turned. I didn't put anything on, he said. We both turned to the open door. Inside, on the windowsill, the toy car was no longer facing outward. It had been turned around. Now looking in. At us. And no one had touched it.